Good evening, fellow Celtic fans and other observers, to the latest Trinity Tims podcast. I'm joined by my two colleagues, Eric Knott from Read Celtic and Joe McHugh from Video Celts. I'm James Forrest of the Celtic blog, as everybody knows. And we're calling this episode The Calm After the Storm. And I think we all know which storm we're referring to. The events at Ibrox. I'm going to let my two colleagues talk about that before I talk about it, because it's still a little bit raw for me. So I'm going to go with Eric first. Eric, talk us through your thoughts on the game and what your thoughts are now on it.
Where to start? It was a tough one to take, obviously. I think for me, probably the toughest part to take was just the complete lack of us showing up. I expected, which we did discuss in the previous pod, that they were going to come out and go for it, and they kept their part of the bargain 100%. They went for it. But unfortunately, we didn't keep our part of the bargain. We all discussed the fact that we thought that Brendan Rodgers was going to have a good old time at Lennox Town getting ready for the game, that everything was going to be comfortable, everything was going to be relaxed, and that we were going in there in a very strong position. And from the outset, when the team selections came up and the fact that Butland was missing, the fact that they had lost, another defender as well, it looked like it was in Tavernier being lost. It looked like it was going to be a walk in the park, and it turned out being the exact polar opposite to what we expected it would be. But for me, and I think for everybody, as the game wore on in the first half, literally from, we'd say, 5 minutes onwards, the shocking performance, and that's all I can say, of Liam Scales and Rio Hatate just beggar belief. Liam Scales, who was a guy who in September 23 was thrown in at the deep end at Ibrox, took his opportunity with both hands, performed really well, and has pretty much been involved in the team ever since because of that performance. It was like he came full circle on Thursday last. It was like he had just he had gone from hero to zero in a game. The fact that he couldn't pass the ball, the amount of trouble that he ran into. There was one instance where he ran himself into the sideline and there was 3 Ibrox players around him, and he literally threw his hands in the air and he was like, what, where, when he probably had opportunities well before that to pass the ball off to someone before he walked himself into trouble, and then he's throwing his hands up and saying, where's the support? It was just shocking. Hatate was just all of the bad things that we've talked about amplified in that first half. Amplified 10 times over in that first half. His passing was shocking, his movement was shocking, his general bullied off the ball, how easily he was bullied off the ball. It was just, for me, I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that Brendan Rodgers had chosen to start him when I firmly felt that somebody like McCowan, would have been a better option, or even Ingles. I know Ingles was sick, but if you're looking, he was man of the match in the previous 2 games, and I know he was sick. But at the same time, that was okay. Maybe he just felt he had no option but to put Hatate on because Ingles was sick. But the fact that he did not take stock in the second, at the end of the first half and at the halftime break, that he did not take stock of the fact that those guys were having an absolute nightmare, and take them off and put them out of their misery, because that's what it was. They were in a state of misery out there on that Ibrox pitch. And he didn't take them off and he put them back on. And we literally started the second half exactly the same way as we commenced the first. So Rodgers is starting to feel a bit antsy, if his press conference is anything to go by yesterday. But the guy's he's not immune to criticism.
Don't worry.
Yeah, he's not immune to criticism. Like if you set a standard, if you set a level that we're expected to, if you set that kind of standard that we play at, and then we go from the standard that we expect as fans to that shambles that we saw at Ibrox on Thursday, then questions are going to be asked. And the first question that was asked is, why did Liam Scales and Rio Hatate come out for the second half? Now, look, at the end of the day, we're football fans. We're bloggers. We're not football managers. But everybody watching that game could see that those guys were a liability. And, I mean, for me in the game, the only person who got pass marks was Cameron Carter-Vickers. He was the only guy who was tuned in. He was the only guy who thought, who actually was trying to stem the danger that was coming at us in waves over and over again. I mean, the rest just seemed to be Calmac. I've never seen a performance as ineffective from him. His passing was just backwards. There was never anything forwards. Kyogo was non-existent, but he wasn't getting the service. Nicholas Kuhn was a shadow of himself, complete shadow of himself. Maeda was just Maeda on a bad day, which we all know that can be what that can be like. But like, to be fair to Maeda, he more often he puts in good days than bad days. But Greg Taylor had a shocker. I thought he was very loose in his passing. He was all over the place as well. And in general, I was baffled by the whole performance. To me, I wrote an article afterwards and I said that was the ghost of Celtic. Because it was just not the Celtic that we're used to seeing, and certainly not the kind of Celtic that we'd expect to show up at Ibrox. And I never in a million years expected us to take a tanking like we did, And I suppose I was shell-shocked and angry at the end of it. And I did put up an article saying things that were probably, you're looking for reasons for something like that. And one of my mates, Liam, as you know, Joe, Liam came in and he said to me as he was walking in the door of our supporters club, he said as he was walking in the door, he said, I've got a bad feeling about this. I said, Jesus, Liam, don't jinx it already. And he said, no, I just have a bad feeling about this. And I was there like, why? He just said, I don't know why. I just do. Then at the end of it, he was vindicated in what he said, but I don't know how he had that bad feeling, but he did. So yeah, shocker. That's all I can say. I'll pass over to you, Joe.
Yep, there's no argument. Unfortunately, there's no counter argument to put up against that. The Celtic are still a far better team, better squad, but they play football matches to decide who's the best team on the day, and we were a woeful team. Putting in a performance like that, we'd probably lose to most teams in the SPFL Premiership. Aberdeen were flying for about 9-10 games this season, and they've gone off the boil, and it's either 9 or 10 games to a win. It happens. Yeah. So we had a couple of players having absolute stinkers, Scales and Hatate. There's a few posted missing, Bernardo, Greg Taylor, Alistair Johnson. And when there's a few areas of the team malfunctioning, a slight explanation I'll give for Scales is when he was getting the ball, there wasn't many people showing up looking for it. But you can still keep the ball in the park, or you should hang on to the ball and find a teammate one way or another. Or, as most of us are saying, the manager should do something. We've seen plenty of instances, first time around and second time around. The September 23 game, when he cobbled together, we finished with defence of Ralston, Scales. It might have been Beaton who came on for Lager Bielke, and Bernardo, Bernaby that finished at left back, and we won 1-0. Rodgers was more than capable of it. The classic was when Simunovic got sent off on the recommendation of Douglas Ross. Most Celtic supporters at that point would have gladly settled for a draw. We've got a great manager in the dugout. He made a change. He stuck on a second striker. He put pressure on Tav, and that second striker scored the winning goal. And many of us haven't been back at Ibrox since then. So he's capable of it. The performance of the team is a mystery, but a bigger mystery is the manager's attitude at half-time. I think there's some mention that he wanted to give the players a chance to sort it out at the start of the second half. Well, he never gave Austin Trusty a second chance to sort it out the second half at Hampden. Changes should have been made at half-time. But there's other factors. Wingers are very important to Celtic. If they're not getting the service, if they're not getting fed, you've got to do something or change the wingers. And it's very obvious that he'll give Yang a bit of time when Celtic are leading, but there's no way that he's going to make a tactical change to put on Yang or Palma to turn the game around, to step into the boots of Kuhn or Maeda. So that's two men down on the bench. That's two important positions. But the most baffling thing is the manager's reaction. We've seen him do it many times before. It's one of the great things that we hold in him, that he can change things, but it just never happened. After 10, 15 minutes, we'll find our way back into it, we'll settle down, we'll get a goal, and then so it's getting towards half time, we're saying, right, hopefully can hang on to just 1-0, and then he can get things changed. But when the same players came out for the second half, there wasn't much confidence there, and he made the changes just before the second goal went in, but the changes never really altered anything. But we've not had much of an explanation for it. From Sunday's comments, something seems to have irked Brendan Rodgers, but as you say, Eric, that's life. You set high standards. Phil Clement's team are not very good. 2 wins in 7, and that was against us and a 1-0 at home against Dundee. They failed to beat Hibs, St Mirren, Motherwell, Spurs, and they failed to beat us in the cup final. We had a good idea what to expect from them. I'm sure Rodgers had a better idea than us, and he was unable to change things. So, baffling mystery. Fortunately, things sorted themselves out a little bit in terms of the league table yesterday, but there's big questions over the manager and the players. And I heard that was on Axom today. Paul John Dykes mentioned Peter Grant's commentary yesterday, and no matter what happens in games in between, beating St Mirren doesn't get it out your system, beating Dundee United doesn't get it out your system, beating Young Boys of Bern, maybe even beating Aston Villa won't get it out your system, because it won't be until the next match. I think it's March the 16th against them. Celtic will need to beat them, and then we can put Ibrox into the past. But until that point, it's going to be lingering over the team. They bounce back. I expect them to do much the same against Dundee United. As a tricky double-header, Ross County away and Dundee away over. That's Saturday, Tuesday, which is a little bit neat, but they've got the squad. Dundee and Ross County are hammered by injuries, playing as many fixtures as we are, so we should be good enough for it. But until we beat them, until we face them and beat them the 16th, there'll be questions and thoughts lingering back to Ibrox. So after Eric and myself have teed it up, I'll leave it to James to wade in.
Aye. Like yourselves, I'm still feeling a bit pissed off. Where I will disagree, Joe, slightly is that I think we'll put this behind us long before we play them again. And one of the reasons why I think that is I don't believe that, regardless of what work Rodgers does between now and then, I don't believe we'll be facing Philip Clement as manager. I don't believe he will be there. So whatever lessons we try to learn from it, I don't think will do us any good, and we'll have to learn a bunch of new ones. I won't say I'm baffled by the performance. I'm baffled by why we made exactly the same mistakes in our approach as we did in the cup final. That was the time to learn the lessons. No, after we've been to Ibrox and got hiding. Because the cup final performance was not great. We didn't get the credit for winning the cup that we should have got, and they didn't get the criticism that they should have got. But that doesn't detract from the fact that we all know, and the players know, and the manager knew, the performance itself wasn't good enough. And I thought we'd have learned something from that, and I thought we'd have adapted our approach to deal with it. Maybe the boss has let his own standards slip just a little bit in terms of his approach to the game because of the number of injuries they had. Because I assumed that whatever tactical plan Clement had would have to be completely rejigged in light of the injury situation, and he didn't. He played exactly the same way, only with different personnel. We are an even weaker team, and it worked even better than it did in the cup final. That's what's frustrating, and that's what's baffling. I mean, to understand Clement as a manager, you only have to look at the comments from the St Mirren boss, who knew exactly how to counter these tactics. The Motherwell boss, who said that he knew exactly what substitutions to make sure that they got at least a point. And yesterday, the Hibs manager, who is not a great manager, another guy who's in a job much bigger than he should have at this point in his career. He knew exactly what to do. At 2-0 down, he knew exactly what to do. And I cannot understand why a guy as qualified as Rodgers and as experienced as Rodgers didn't know what to do. That is my only concern. But it's a minor concern because I don't think, as I say, we'll be facing Clement. The other thing is that these results sometimes happen. I wrote a piece a couple of days ago about the 6-2 game, and it was followed by the 5-1 game at Ibrox. I remember the Joe Vengos 5-1 at Celtic Park, which came during a spell when I don't even know how far behind we were in the league, but a lot. We had I talked about the 2 wins that we had. I think they were within a week of each other in 1991, and they made no difference whatsoever to the outcome of the title or to the trajectory that the two clubs were on. And it's the same with the 5-1 at Ibrox that they won. We went back there, of course, later in the season and won 3-0, already having won the league, already being League Cup winners, and on the brink of the Martin O'Neill treble. So I don't think it matters all that much. In that regard, I've sort of put it behind me, except for the lingering frustration that we should never have been in that position in the first place, because Rodgers should have recognised how he was going to line up and countered it, and he didn't do it. I don't know why. I can't answer that question. Maybe the manager himself was a bit complacent, but he does have to take a criticism for it. And I mean, the other decision that kind of blew my mind a bit was playing Hatate. And okay, I understood that Engels had picked up a virus or whatever and wasn't going to be fit to start the game. But I would feel a hell of a lot better if I thought that in the event that Engels had been fit, that it would have been Hatate who dropped out and not Bernardo, which is exactly what I suspect he would have done. And that's very hard to defend because Hatate has been advertising a performance like that for weeks and weeks and weeks. And we've been talking about it for weeks and weeks and weeks. And I don't know why the manager thought it was a good idea to play a player who is so off form in a game where the most important and most critical aspect was a midfield that functioned properly. And
James, can I make a point? I make a point? And I don't want to detract from what you're saying, but like Brendan Rodgers has to face facts that Philippe Clement had obviously marked Hatate down as the weak link because the way he got his players to swarm around him. There was 2 and 3 players on him at all times, forcing him into the errors that Clement knew he'd make.
Yes.
So, at the end of the day, yes, Clement has been made a fool of many times in the away, in the away games that the Ibrox side have been playing. However, he's not where he is from having, without having some tactical nous. And he, just like we, has obviously had, up to that point, had obviously been watching Hatate's performances. And he singled him out as the one who was going to be the weak link. Scales was a different story. We probably didn't expect that from Scales because he's been solid enough all season. He hasn't really. But we know that Scales sometimes he can be a bit of a car crash. We've seen it. We've seen evidence of it in the past. But the whole Hatate thing, that could be seen a mile off. Everybody saw it. And if we saw it, Philippe Clement saw it.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. So we know that the game itself was terrible. The performance was terrible. In the aftermath of the game, there was some discussion, but not enough of it, over the coins being thrown again at Celtic players, the Celtic manager, which some of us saw coming and some of us were worried about. And it was not difficult to work out that was a situation we were going to face. There was also the usual sectarian bile pouring out of the stands. I'm going to do another piece on that tomorrow because there's some comments that have irked me today about that subject. But I wrote a piece today on strict liability, which I think is now about as unavoidable as it can be. The political class have got a lot of concerns about football in Scotland. Ibrox is not the only place where coins have been thrown recently. We've got flares and pyro and some other general issues to contend with. And I think that our political class is sick and tired of waiting for football to get its house in order. And the basic point of the piece that I put up was that we have one chance now, I think. And it's that football steers which version of strict liability it will be. Because if the politicians steer it, we're going to have all sorts of problems. What do you think of that? Joe first.
You're probably right. There's a lot of noise about it. Maybe say there's enough other things going on in politics without them getting involved in football. But it'd be an easy one. It's an easy target after events in Glasgow City Centre in the morning, lunchtime of the Cup final, and then the coins getting thrown. But I have no faith in anything to do with the Celtic board. So I don't know where you're expecting them to provide leadership or examples or to stand up. They'll run a mile from it. I could see them backing in with their friends at Ibrox against strict liability and putting in as much obstacles as possible. There are issues that Celtic have to deal with. There are coin throwers at Celtic. There are people at Celtic that will throw things onto the pitch. But Celtic should be dealing with that just as across the city, they should be dealing with a far bigger problem. I mean, it goes back when the glass got thrown at the Celtic physio, when the mysterious glass appeared in the pitch at half-time, not a peep, not a word, not a complaint, no investigation, nothing done. So it's no surprise that things went the way as you predicted on Thursday. But politicians, they're not very good at politics, so God knows what they're going to come up with.
Most of them aren't.
So, and equally, we've got I was going to call them football directors. We've got company directors that don't really know much about football. They can arrange a balance sheet and an AGM and keep the majority shareholder happy from a distance. But as regards to coming up with any drive, any initiative, any thoughts of how this should be steered, how it can be tackled, how it can be kept inside football, I've got no expectation that they're going to come up with those answers. So it could be like the Offensive Behaviour at Football Act, where they get dragged along to Holyrood, pose for pictures, and before you know it, some ridiculous legislation's brought in that takes years to turn over. So, I mean, while criticising the Celtic directors, if Scottish football is reliant on Neil Doncaster,
that's a bigger question, I think.
Mike Mulroney, the president of the SFA and chairman of Division 1 Alloa, then what help them? I mean, I'm not aware of any strong figures elsewhere at football clubs. Dave Cormack at Aberdeen's quite gobby. Not heard much from him recently. There's nobody at Hearts. There isn't a strong voice anywhere inside Scottish football legislation. So it's up in the air. And we saw Maxwell's pathetic appearance at the Scottish Parliament when he was asked about bringing in legislation bringing in a legislator to keep clubs viable. Oh no, nothing to worry about here. Everything's hunky dory, except if you're Dumbarton or Inverness, Cali Thistle. Yeah. And there's a suspicion there's others in the pipeline. There could be other clubs going into administration. So there's no expectation on my part that there's a leader anywhere in Scottish football will say, this is what we need to do to tackle this. Trust us, we'll go on with it, we'll resolve it. Just you go on with making a mess of everything else in our life. Leave football to ourselves. So, Eric, you're viewing Scotland from a distance. What's your take on it from afar?
It's a little bit different for me, being where I'm located. I'm kind of on the outside looking in that regard. I suppose Ian Maxwell reminds me an awful lot of, who's the guy in Iraq who said everything's fine? Comical Ali, was it? Or
Comical Ali.
That guy, what was it? Yeah, I mean, he reminds me of that kind of guy. There's nothing wrong. Everything's fine. Everything's hunky-dory. You know, Scottish football, for somebody, look, obviously I'm a Celtic supporter, you know, a long, long time, but for somebody who watches what goes on across the water from where I am, it's a banana republic. You know, it really is in terms of the way it operates. And I mean, obviously I understand Irish politics, and I wouldn't trust Irish politicians as far as I could throw them. So I certainly don't follow Scottish politics that closely. But they're all the same. They're all of the same ilk, you know. So I mean, yeah, I wouldn't have any faith in Scottish politicians doing what needs to be done. As an Irishman, and looking on at the things that I see going on at Ibrox, I find it highly offensive. I find it really, really. I take it to heart. I take it to heart that somebody wants to be, you know, they sing about being up to my knees in blood, you know, so that, you know, I have a lot of Protestant friends over here who absolutely just, you know, I grew up in County Cork, and there was a few Protestant people lived around me that I still know pretty well, or my family knows anyway. And down through the years, one of them remained particularly friendly with my father, and I used to talk to him about it, like, you know, about what goes on over there. And he was completely and utterly gobsmacked, like, and he felt embarrassed when he'd see the things that would be going on at Ibrox. You know, he was a nice guy, he was a good guy, you know. And it's completely different over here. People over here just don't they don't get it. They don't understand why, you know, the people behave the way they do at Ibrox. But at the same time, you know, believe it or not, I have a guy who lives down the road from me who is a Rangers supporter. He's an Ibrox supporter, right? He's a Dublin man. He has a proud Irish heritage. And he's told me he's been at Ibrox. And I've said to him on occasion, like I said, well, how do they treat you at Ibrox? And he said, they treat me very well. And I said, I find that very hard to believe, that they would treat somebody like you very well the minute they heard your accent at Ibrox. So half the time I wonder, is he spoofing? I don't know. But I do give him an awful going over for being an Ibrox fan anyway. So, you know, but the fact of the matter is, like, that's neither here nor there in the whole scheme of things. The whole scheme of things is that one of our players and our manager had coins thrown at them. Ernie Engels is lucky that there wasn't blood drawn, you know, and that his eye wasn't damaged. We've all been made to remember time and time again what happened to Hugh Dallas back in 1999. You know, that's the day that'll go down in infamy. Yet we're now 26 years on, and the same thing is still happening. And you have a player getting a player, like, I mean, we'll put it this way: if you were out in the street and somebody fired a coin and whacked you in the face and hit you in the eye with a coin, what would happen? You know, what that person would be done for assault. Obviously, they're trying to find the culprit. They had their evidence bag. They threw the coin into the evidence bag. But I read your article today, James, on strict liability, and unfortunately, because there is no appetite in Scotland to do anything at all about this issue, to do anything, there never has been. So the reality is, you are eventually going to get a bunch of idiots who are politicians deciding that they're going to do something about it.
Yeah.
And what they will do about it will be draconian. And it will just be like untenable when it happens. So you did say that Celtic should lead the way, but as Joe pointed out, I honestly don't see how Celtic could possibly lead the way, you know, because I wouldn't have any faith in the board stepping in and doing anything about this. None whatsoever. We lead the way in everything in Scotland in terms of domination, in terms of football and, you know, football domination, in terms of being the best run club. But I mean, when it comes to the things that at times really matter to fans, no interest. And one of this is one of the things that, you know, really matters to fans, and there's no interest, there's no appetite there to do anything about it. And yes, Joe is right in what he says. We have coin throwers in our sport. We have idiots in our sport. Every single football team on the planet has idiots in their support.
Yeah.
You know, but not to the extent of what we see at Ibrox. Because you predicted that it was going to happen. It happened. And we're lucky that it wasn't a more serious incident. That if that coin had gone into Ernie Engels' eye, that's a footballer's career screwed. Because he needs his eye to be able to play football.
Yeah.
And that coin was pretty damn close to hitting his eye. So someday the luck is going to run out if this isn't stopped.
Oh, without doubt.
And someday, sooner rather than later, somebody's going to get seriously hurt at Ibrox. And I don't know. That's all I can say in it, because I don't know who's going to step in and solve this problem or fix this problem, because this problem now is like a cancer in the game. It's spread. It's gone to every fucking facet of the game. And that, as with cancer, how can you can't cure it unless you kill it.
Well, you can try and cure it.
Yeah, you can.
We don't try very hard here.
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
even guys who are on the right side of this argument, guys like Spears, who has been consistent on calling out the singing across the city and all that. I mean, I listened to his podcast the other day on it and agreed with almost every single thing that he said until the last bit. Where him and I can't remember who was on there with him, but he said that he doesn't get unduly concerned by the songs that get sung, accepting that they embarrass Scotland. Well, as I said repeatedly in articles, when it's your blood they're up to their knees and you take it a bit more seriously than that.
You do.
And that's why a lot of people in Scotland still don't get it. They still don't get it because it's not them being sung about. It's not them being targeted. But those of us who are being targeted and are being sung about, we fucking get it and we're not happy about it. And we keep waiting for something to happen that never happens.
I also find it highly offensive as well.
Is that the wrong thing is going to happen and that the politicians will step in and impose their version of it, and that will not be to anyone's benefit. I can't trust the political class that gave us the Offensive Behaviour at Football Act. I can't trust those people at all. Don't want them anywhere near this. And I think if our club doesn't see that something like this is coming, then our political antenna is not very sharp, because it is most definitely coming. And football either leads it or football's just going to get run over by it.
Yep.
It's a bad situation.
As we said, somebody is going to end up getting seriously hurt at Ibrox. And then it'll be too little too late. We should have done something about it, but they never did.
Yeah, the danger's coming from so many directions now, but right. I mean, if it's not a coin getting thrown or something like that, it's going to be Pyro's going to seriously injure somebody, and that's going to lead to the same thing. I mean, there's so many elements to this which could all lead to the same disaster, and football just seems oblivious to them. Football seems to want somebody else to come in and solve it, and eventually somebody else is going to come in and solve it, but it won't be people that we want to solve it.
Football has been working hard to bring back the Glasgow Derby. They've been spending lots of time, lots of discussions. They've even spent money at the grounds. I don't know if there's anything been spent at Ibrox yet, but Celtic have certainly spent money to welcome their good friends from Ibrox back to Celtic Park. They want that done as quickly as possible, and that tells you their priorities. They want
I personally think you have grounds now to never have them back.
Exactly.
As long as Ibrox is an unsafe environment, as long as Ibrox is an unsafe environment for our players and our management team, I don't think there's any justification for bringing them back. I'd be very interested to see if they actually do have fans in March. I still wonder about that.
Celtic are working on it. Celtic want it to happen.
They may well be working on it, but Celtic worked on it before and then didn't let them in for the first game.
Yeah, well, Celtic done the work. Celtic spent money at Celtic Park to make changes to that area that the away supporters come in. So it's something that the Celtic board desire, and the more that it's home fans only, I think I would say a majority of Celtic supporters would be quite happy with that. There's a few thousand that would love to go to Ibrox. It's a war medal if you go to Ibrox and get your pictures taken there. But over the piece, I mean, is this all to make it a bit more exciting for Sky Sports? I mean, in terms of policing and stewarding, it must be cost effective to have home fans only. The cost of bringing in away supporters is going to be very expensive. And if somebody can explain to me the benefits of it, I'd love to know, because we've sort of got used to 800s. We're now used to zeros. And the way things are, zeros is the best option to me. There'll be some guys deeply offended. They're desperate to get back to Ibrox to show what uber Celtic supporters they are, but it ain't worth it. We should be distancing ourselves from them at every turn instead of working with them to try and restore the good old days. But we'll wait. I don't know when we'll get an announcement on the March 16th game, but who knows if it's even a discussion amongst the Celtic board. They don't tell us anything. They put in an appearance at the AGM, and other than that, we barely hear from them from one year to another.
But it's a sad indictment of what was once a very good football spectacle. You know, when the Broomloan Road was open, when we had 7,000 of them in Celtic Park, like back in the day when that was happening, there was a good atmosphere, because if the home side were playing bad, the crowd went quiet, the away fans made the noise. It was a good atmosphere. It's just it's sad that the game has descended into what it has.
Joe's right about the day they ended up.
Yeah, it's also sad that, you know, Joe is right in what he's saying. It's sad that it isn't worth going to Ibrox.
See, the 7,000 away fans, in recent times, with them throwing potatoes on at Celtic Park, that's their idea of humour. The Jock Steven songs, etc., Celtic Boys, all that stuff, we don't need it. Absolutely don't need it. So the halcyon days when they'd come and it'd be chanting back and forward, it's become more and more poisonous. And if there's 3,000 of them coming into Celtic Park in March, it'll be poison from the first minute. So if Michael Nicholson and Peter Lill think that's great, it helps restore their cherished brand, good luck to them, get on with it, because it ain't worth it. It's better off as it is with no away supporters, is trying to encourage them. But who knows? The thing I say to many folk, I doubt how much discussion have the Celtic directors been having about events at Ibrox. I suspect not very much.
I'm sure there's been
game, we've got St Mirren, we've got Dundee United, maybe looking at Young Boys, maybe looking at Aston Villa. I don't think there'll be much soul searching or questioning about what went on at Ibrox. And it helps build up the demand would always be there, but having lost at Ibrox, there's going to be an extra edge to the Celtic supporters on March the 16th. They can maybe squeeze a bit more out of corporate hospitality and they can build the match up. So that's my cynical view. I don't think I'm too far wrong.
Yeah, but look, I mean, the board have a duty of care to their employees, and their employees are Ernie Ingles and Brendan Rodgers. And if they're subject to being assaulted, then in any normal company, that's a point of discussion. That's not something.
The first duty of care is to the balance sheet. Employees come after the balance sheet.
Listen, we all know here, right, that if a Celtic director as much as got hit with a cold chip at one of those games, there would be a fucking major outcry. Our club would certainly be on the front foot then.
Absolutely. So if there's any Ibrox fans on here now,
I'm sure there's one or two watching.
Yeah.
Paying attention. Which brings us to yesterday. I said this morning, I said in the aftermatch piece that I put up, that all we required was a kind of no frills, no mistakes, risk-free performance which got the job done. And that's what we delivered, and I'm glad that that's what we delivered. It wasn't a sparkling football, but it did the job that we were supposed to do. And of course, it has the occasion was helped along mightily by the fact that the Ibrox bubble burst after just one game.
Who predicted that?
Which I found rather amusing. And so, a 13-point lead at the top of the league. If we win, hopefully on Wednesday, we will briefly go 16 points clear until they play against Dundee the following night. And I don't think their fans have a lot of confidence in getting 3 points out of that one. So first things first, Joe, did it in any way make you feel any better about Thursday? The fact that we've got the job done, we've extended our lead again?
It could have been worse if we dropped points. So we never dropped points. We looked. We don't seem to have much of a middle ground. We've had some fantastic performances. We're always going to point to Aberdeen semi-final and Leipzig at home as the other top performances. It's hard to be really fantastic against SPFL clubs because the time wasting from the St Mirren goalkeeper yesterday.
Oh, it was terrible.
Every team that gets a throw in at Celtic Park, a throw in within 25 yards of the goal line, they managed to waste a minute on it. the person to take the long throw is the furthest away possible. It said that you don't get much momentum getting built up. You don't get a chance, but it wasn't fantastic. It was good. It was back on the rails.
Yeah.
As I say, it's hard to be fantastic when you're against such unambitious opponents. Most St Mirren's, Motherwell, St Johnstone will take a 3-0 or 4-0 at Celtic Park and go away and say, oh, well, it wasn't something they were counting on. So there was some decent aspects to the game. Trusty came in, but I think Scales could have played just as well against St Mirren. But Trusty's back in the fold. Hopefully he gets a bit of a run. Managers don't tend to rotate in central defence. Once they get a central defensive partnership that they like, they tend to stick by it. But equally, I think Carter Vickers might need to be taken out for a game somewhere along the line, because he's had problems in the past. We've been wary of playing him too often. So I don't know which fixture it is to take him out of, because taking him out would mean putting in Scales and Trusty. Perhaps Ross County on Saturday might be one for that, and have him back against Dundee next midweek. But mainly the team get back on track. Couldn't come up with 2 good goals, but there'll always be a shadow of a 3-0 defeat at Ibrox. And when you see the team playing better, you're thinking, why did that not happen? And it makes the events of Thursday more mysterious. But they're back on track. Hopefully follow that up against Dundee United. And all they can do is win the matches in front of them, manage the squad a bit better. McCowan came in, did well. Engels did particularly well. Engels looks as if he's growing into it. And there's no need to be playing Hatate. If he's so badly out of form, leave him on the bench, because there's 4 players. McGregor's always going to play. Bernardo, Engels and McCowan are currently ahead of Hatate in form. So put them on in that order. Rotate between the 4. Pick 3 of the 4, and Hatate's come on as a sub. And it might be Hatate rediscovers his form. It might have some inspirational play. There might be an injury. Something else lets him in. But we're reasonably covered in midfield. And I thought Adam Ida did okay.
So did I. I'm glad you said that, mate.
He's quite forceful.
Even less like a bin bag, anyway.
When there's not so much happening, he'll get involved and he'll be looking for things. Sometimes it comes off, sometimes it doesn't. But anyone criticising him, a waste of 9 million. You've got to pay 9 million for decent strikers these days. We've tried lots of 3 and 4 million strikers, 3 and 5 million on a Yeti, and Ida at 9 million. It's no compliment whatsoever to Adam Ida, but he's more than twice the player that Albion Ajeti was for us. So things generally looking a bit better, but it'll take a bit more. Young Boys is coming up not too far away. That's a fortnight away. That'll be the test for them, and we'll find out whether Young Boys are refreshed or rusty. But we've got a good few games to go before then. A slight corner was turned, but the nature of Ibrox on Thursday was so severe, it'll take a wee bit more than a 3-0 against St Mirren to get out our system. But over to Eric for your take on yesterday's odds. We'll be live tonight. We'll be live Monday night, so I can say your take on yesterday's events.
Yesterday's,
yeah. Well, for me, I had a blizzard going on outside, so I had a double bill of football to watch. So I like I was saying to Joe before we came on, James, we've probably had the heaviest snowfall I've ever witnessed in my life here. It was covering halfway up the cars. It was 8 inches nearly the depth around where we are. Yeah, so I had nothing to do but watch football. So I watched the Hibs Ibrox game first. And I did predict in my article on in the aftermath of the game on Thursday that they would drop points at Easter Road. Joe didn't have much faith in Hibs, but I did. So yeah, look, I think for me the performance against, like, obviously after watching the game at Easter Road, I expected We had the bit between our teeth after that, or we could have the bit between our teeth to go and push 13 points clear. So we needed that opportunity, and we needed to take that opportunity. But having said that, the performance, watching the Ibrox side play the way they did against Hibernian, left me scratching my head. Left me completely scratching my head as to like what the hell went on Thursday. So, but to move on to the St Mirren game, look, it was a solid, if unspectacular performance. Everybody did a job. They did their job well. Teams like St Mirren are always going to set up, as Joe said, like the Motherwells and the St Johnsons did this world for a 3 or 4-0 loss and to time waste. That's all they do. We need a few more Falkirks in the Scottish Premiership. After the way they came and played against us in the League Cup earlier on in the season, we need a couple of more teams like that who are willing to come and actually have a go. This anti-football that some of the managers, and I mean, you have managers the likes of Stephen Robinson doing the rounds. I mean, he's the likes of I suppose Kettlewell. He was at Ross County as well, wasn't he? So they've done the rounds. These guys, they don't change their tactics. They always set up the same way against Celtic. You can pretty much guarantee that they're just going to set out to waste time and camp in the box, park the bus. And it's hard to watch. And like, I know Brendan Rodgers went off on one yesterday, but I will agree with him on one point. Like, he is right in where he says that teams set up to frustrate us. And it's not easy to break it down at times. And look, we've all been witness to games where they've set up to frustrate us. We saw how Dundee United set up to frustrate us, and they succeeded in that regard. It's, without putting too fine a point on it, it's a shit tactic. It's horrible to watch. But unfortunately,
that's media here which keeps giving managers credit for it as well, which
that's another thing that completely frustrates me. But at the same time, it seems that Rodgers finally heeded the warnings, or the results. He learned lessons from the game at Ibrox, and he dropped Tati and he dropped Scales. Trusty came in, and Trusty had a solid performance and got a goal. And it again kind of makes you wonder, what did he do that was so bad in that first half at Hampden to have himself benched up until yesterday? And then he came back and he played. And like even up to that point where he went off at halftime at Hampden, he had been solid the whole time. He had hardly put a foot wrong since he had joined the club. We paid $5.5 million for the guy. We need to utilise him, especially when he hasn't really, made any bad mistakes in the run-up to where he was benched. Yes, Hitate was brought on, and I think Joe's also right in saying, give him a rest, just give him a break, work on his weaknesses at Lennoxtown. The coaching team need to work. I said in my article on the day after the game at Ibrox that the collective failed at Ibrox, and the collective is the team and the coaches. But ultimately, the coaches failed the team as well. Brendan Rodgers failed, and he failed Liam Scales because he put them in a situation in the second half that they shouldn't have been in, and they should have been taken off, and they should have been replaced by players who were more up for it than they were anyway. But I guess the point I'm making is that he seemed to take that on board and he seemed to learn from it, but it's too little too late. The result at Ibrox has happened now. It's done. It's in the rearview mirror. We have to move on. As Joe said, it's probably going to be a little harder to move on than we think. But at the same time, I wrote an article this evening and I said, if we had won at Ibrox and lost yesterday, does any one of us think that we'd be anywhere near as pissed off if we lost at home to St Mirren as we are at losing away at Ibrox? No, we wouldn't. We'd be frustrated. We'd be disappointed, but we wouldn't be to any level or to the level that we were after that game, because that game was just such a shock to the system. It came out of nowhere. So if I'm happy, am I happy with the result yesterday? Of course I'm happy with the result yesterday. Am I delighted that the Ibrox club dropped points? I put it this way. If Hans Higamani wasn't playing yesterday, they'd have been wrongly beaten by Hibs.
Yeah, they would have been. Yeah.
Because they wouldn't have had anybody who could get over them. And the fact of the matter is, like, he's really starting to come along in his game, this guy. However long they're going to be able to hold on to him for, because he's now all of a sudden an asset. He's probably worth 15 million now at this stage, So I'm sure we'll start getting. I wonder will we start getting bids from anywhere, mysterious, far away.
It's got a handful of goals, and they were already talking about Everton wanting to buy him.
Yeah,
this is the one that's beginning already.
And now today, apparently, Ryan Porteous is unhappy, and he's on his way there as well. So.
Oh, good, excellent. I would take that. I would be happy with that.
Yeah,
I've got to jump in on the Hibs point. You said I've no faith in Hibs. Hibs are horrendous. They're the foreign team in Scotland, and that says a lot.
Well, that's how bad they were yesterday.
That guy, Rocky Bashiri, is a horrendous defender. Him and the guy Miller at right back, it looks as if they've been playing football for about 6 months. Bashiri scored a fantastic header, 83 minutes, and then 89 minutes. Who knows what he's doing? Struggling to control a bread and butter ball in the halfway line. Igamani gets away from him. He can't even get close enough to Igamani to foul him. The guy's a terrible player. So I'll go on record. Clermont's side are capable of dropping points to any side in this division, especially away from home. Anyone can do it. Well, anyone has done it. I mean, it's not a case of
almost everyone's done it now.
They've got 3 wins and 10 away games. So those 3 teams that lost to them, shame on them. If they get another chance this season, they should sort that out. But Hibs are no great shakes, but they are the foreign team. They've picked up where Aberdeen were and been able to knock teams aside. But again, it was a slapstick game at Easter Road. It wasn't a 3-3 classic. Much like the League Cup final, there was tons of errors there. Igamani scored a couple of decent goals, but the defending from Hibs was teeing things up. And after 20 minutes, after 25, 30 minutes, they should have been 3 or 4-0 up, done and dusted, and back along the road. The fact that they never managed it, and Robin Proper might be there, Rocky Bashiri. Unfortunately, we never tested him, but Proper is not a very good defender. The Bashiri goal, it shouldn't have happened. You should have a centre-half challenging for it and a goalkeeper all over it, but none of them were there for it. But that's my tuppence on Hibs. Good luck to Hibs. The form team.
What about Martin Boyle's 94th-minute chance?
It's not
so
really.
Do you guys want to cover briefly Rodgers' comments after the game?
Do we what?
Yeah.
What were you? You want to go first in this one?
Yeah. Over to Eric.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's smarting a bit. He's clearly, this has been festering for quite a while. I don't know if he used the whole Kieran Tierney thing as a catalyst to, or a platform to launch his tirade from. But what I will say is, we trust, the old saying in Brendan, we trust Brendan Rodgers as a manager. That's not in question here. It's never been in question. He's an elite manager. I accept that he had an off day on Thursday. What I don't accept is that he's not open to criticism, or he feels he can't take criticism. So this is what happens when the plaudits are coming your way all the time as a manager and you're winning games all the time.
Yep.
When you have such a poor performance as we did on Thursday at Ibrox, it's very, very hard for you then to react and say, I got it wrong. And he got it wrong. And I'm not going to go, I've been over the course there, I'm not going to go over it again. We know what he got wrong. Everybody could see what he got wrong. But if he had come out and said, yeah, look, I got my calls wrong. I made some bad decisions in that game. We paid the price. But look, we're going to learn lessons from it. We're going to move on. That's fair enough. He obviously had that conversation with Callum McGregor.
He did, and Callum did as well.
Yeah, he had that conversation with Callum McGregor because Callum McGregor came out and it's one thing I will say, which sets us apart from the Ibrox side. We take it on the chin. We don't make excuses. We accept what we did wrong, and we say we'll learn from it. Again, yesterday at Easter Road, it was everybody's fault but Clermont's. It was Beaton's fault. It was just everybody else's fault but his. I suppose that's the difference between Clermont and Rodgers. Clermont just makes excuse after excuse after excuse. He never accepts anything. He never accepts responsibility for anything. However, his looks farcical because he's losing games right, left, and centre when he's away from home. where it's tougher for Rodgers egotistic because he's a winner and he's winning all the time. And then when we have a calamitous performance like we had last Thursday, it's very hard for him to take it on the chin. And it seems, as Joe said, even he went back to the game against Bruges and he brought up Dyson Maeda in the game against Bruges. It seems that any level of criticism that comes at him, whether it be, in games months ago or games a couple of days ago, it all festers, it all builds inside him, and then we have an outburst like we did yesterday. It was to a small degree a little bit unhinged. I didn't expect it. Fair enough, his comments about Kieran Tierney, that's fine. You shouldn't be chanting about a player we don't even have, and Greg Taylor's still there. That's disrespectful of Greg Taylor. Look, Greg Taylor has his critics. We all know he's
yeah.
We all know he's there.
Unfortunately for Greg Taylor, as I've always said, his biggest problem is that his name isn't Kieran Tierney. I think it's scared him a bit.
Yeah,
I think he's feeling a bit. That's how I interpreted Rodgers' comments about Tierney yesterday, as being a response to something that maybe Taylor had said to him, a response that Taylor's having, and Rodgers is just protecting the player. In terms of his comments about the fans, that's a bit hard. That's a bit harder to take. I understand in a sense, and I agree wholeheartedly with the sentiment that he doesn't need the fans to be understanding and supportive when we're 3-0 up, but when we're 0-0 and when things aren't quite going well, that's when the team needs the fans to support what they're doing and understand what they're trying to do. I completely get that, and I totally agree with that. But this whole, criticism itself should be outlawed and punished by whipping in the public square stuff. It's not going to fly, Brendan. Come on, seriously. I mean, my God, we all know that Thursday was a calamity, and part of that is his fault. And he's going to have to wear that, I'm afraid. We're not here to be cheerleaders for the manager or for anybody else at the club.
And I make a point, James. He talked yesterday. He talked in the press conference yesterday where he said, I really don't understand this fan getting frustrated when we pass the ball back. Well, I'm sorry. That frustration comes back from what was going on Thursday, where they just constantly kept passing the ball back. And like he said, fair enough. If you want to say that they're passing the ball back to rebuild and start the attack again, they didn't start any fucking attacks. Sorry,
the game was far too slow on Thursday. And when you do, and when you're constantly playing at that pace, you allow the opposition to reorganise and regroup whenever they lose the ball. If you're taking 10 seconds to get the ball forward, you're just letting them get reorganised, and it just makes your life harder. We've seen it happen in league games this season as well.
Yeah,
we've seen it happen in other games
at Ibrox. It didn't lead to anything. So that's why.
I do understand the general concept behind it. I do generally understand what he's talking about, but it has to be done a bit quicker sometimes. So, I'm a bit like, I'm not going to get too pissed at him because I thought that his general comments yesterday were excellent. I thought his general remarks yesterday about how he never had any doubt that the team would get back on the bus, and he's happy with the performance, and we're not looking elsewhere and we don't care what happens elsewhere. Our focus is on ourselves and getting our own job done. I thought, as usual, Rodgers was excellent, and you contrast that with the rambling maniac across the city whose press conference in Edinburgh was completely unhinged. I mean, imagine having the ball to actually think that John Beaton is somehow biased against you. I mean, that's nuts. That's absolutely off the charts. Joe, you're very patient.
Yeah, that's
I know you're plenty to say.
Both. I don't think Rodgers did Taylor or Tierney any favours by bringing them into that conversation yesterday.
The Tierney thing frustrates me anyway, but I mean, I went round and round on Tierney in the pub last night, and I was just, why? I don't get it. I'm not understanding the Tierney thing at all. Don't get it.
If I'd been chanting for Tierney during the first half or in the middle of the second half, but it was a chant very late on in the match. The game was done. It was 3-0. Then that is no slight on Greg Taylor. It was a little bit contrived to join.
I just wonder if Greg Taylor himself was a bit upset by it, and that's why Rodgers has done what he's done. I can't think any other reason why he would have. Can't think any other explanation.
That could well be the case, but making that public, I don't think helped. It puts a bigger spotlight on things.
Maybe not.
Rodgers.
People were already doing the body language studying anyway. Taylor went right up the tunnel at full time and all that. People were already doing that today. So
when Rodgers first came back, summer 2023, there was speculation about Tierney, and he waxed lyrically. He talked about what a great guy Tierney is, and anytime we met up in England, we always talked about Celtic. He could have knocked it in the head. He's been quite happy to encourage it. Having Kieran Tierney at the Celtic charity dinner in London, it wasn't the most innocent and innocuous of events. It was
it was not.
It was a part of the jigsaw. It was part of the pathway. So if you want to be pernickety, that you could twist it and say that those incidents were disrespectful to Greg Taylor. You could almost say signing any footballer is disrespectful to the guy at the club in that position. That's life. And what's the problem with Greg Taylor's contract? Are Celtic not offering him enough money? Does Celtic not value him enough? So there's lots and lots of things going on here. I suspect Celtic are offering Taylor a sort of second-tier salary, not the same salary that Alistair Johnston and Carter Vickers have recently got. And at the age of 27, Taylor's got every right to look around to see what else is out there. I would think.
Yeah, but Taylor also has to be realistic. Taylor's not on the level of Carter Vickers and Alistair Johnston.
And he's not been offered that, I would suspect. And I think there's absolutely no chance that he sees his future at Dynamo Zagreb. I mean, that's a wild story. Croatia exports players. They don't tend to bring in free agents at the age of 27, giving them the best deal of their life. They buy young players from maybe other Eastern European countries, and they develop a hell of a lot of their own. So that seems strange, and I think he was targeting the wrong audience when he was criticising the fans at the match. There's grumbles, there's complaints, there's moans. There wasn't any booing or jeering. If it was booing or jeering, I could see it justified. Rodgers was upset by the online criticism that there's been since Ibrox on Thursday. It's human nature. The olden days, he used to all claim... The olden days, they claim, I don't read the papers. And now they'll tell you they don't look at social media. I would be amazed if Brendan Rodgers doesn't listen into the Radio Clyde phone-in once or twice a week, or get sent segments of it, or get sent segments from podcasts, areas of websites, message boards, Twitter, etc. So he's on the ball, and there was some scathing criticism. I would never, ever go personal on Rodgers or any player. I'd keep it strictly to their performances, judgment, decisions. But there was a lot of criticism from Thursday. Like politicians, football managers are surrounded by bubbles where everyone tells them how wonderful they are. So if there's a little bit of conflict from outside, it's human nature that's going to irk him. And he wasn't duped. He wasn't led up the garden path. It was very straightforward questioning at the conference yesterday. It was almost sympathetic questioning, and Rodgers had a lot to get off his chest, and he certainly did that. So it makes for box office tomorrow. I don't know if he's going to follow it up, if there's going to be any... I can't see Rodgers going back in anything.
No, I don't know if he'll go back, but you'll see a more contrite Rodgers, I think. He might clarify it without actually reversing himself.
Yeah.
But that's the thing about Rodgers. Rodgers does sometimes come across as a guy who can't take criticism, right? But he does listen to it, and he does understand it. And when Rodgers feels like he's made mistakes, he will change things. So, he's easy to get defensive sometimes.
We would all far rather have Brendan Rodgers than Neil Lennon, Ronnie Dyler, or whoever else, Tony Mowbray, whoever else the Celtic board dream up. So he is the best man to manage Celtic, absolutely no doubt about it. Equally, he's not flawless. He does make mistakes. He makes tactical mistakes. Most of us think he was a bit off target yesterday. life goes on. It doesn't mean we're chasing him down the road to Leicester. It's honest. It's an open forum. We can say what we're thinking, and if he's too sensitive, he can't be sensitive. You can't be Celtic manager twice and not be sensitive and be oversensitive. You need to know the ropes, the lie of the land, how tough the environment is, and it won't have come as a great shock to him, but maybe a combination of circumstances and timing all led to things yesterday. And tomorrow will be interesting. Hopefully a solid win over Dundee United, and we can start progressing and look forward rather than backwards. I think that's the aftermath of the Motherwell, the St Mirren game covered off.
I'll just make one small point, and it's kind of in relation to both the game at Ibrox and the game yesterday. I don't think Brendan Rodgers would be facing any criticism had we gone to Ibrox, lost 3-0, but hit the woodwork, had 5, 7, 6 shots on target, and made a game of it. I think the reason I think the reason he's facing the criticism that he's been facing is because we just didn't show up, and that's why people are hurt. Yeah, exactly. So that's just my point on it.
So let's do a brief one on tomorrow. How Joe? How would you line up tomorrow? What do you think? How do you think the manager will go? Oh, sorry, Wednesday.
I would think minimal changes, but you've also got to take in mind that there's Ross County and Dundee next Tuesday, so that's a genuine 3 games in 7 days. So it would need to freshen up in some ways. I think the most obvious one that doesn't really make too much difference would be Kyogo in for Ida. I'd like to see Ida getting more starts and Kyogo coming off the bench. In midfield, there's not Bernardo could come in possibly, but as I say, there's 4 decent midfielders there and one that's off form, so the manager's got to manage them. Trusty and Carter Vickers will stay together.
I think so.
Ralston doesn't get much of a look in unless Johnston's injured, and after his comments yesterday, Alec Valley can forget all about starting against Dundee United. It would be amazing if Taylor was dropped and Alec Valley started tomorrow, but you can never quite tell. But I think
you're right. I didn't even think of that, but you're right. Imagine Rodgers dropping Taylor for tomorrow for Wednesday's game.
There'll be minimal changes, but he does have to. Minimal changes. He does have to make a couple because there's 3 games in 7 days. It gives us a little bit of time before the Kilmarnock Cup tie, but there'll be a few changes here and there. Not particularly on form, just a case of keeping guys involved. But I would stop short of seeing Palmer or Yang starting. We don't really have any backup. We don't have any options. It's a case of Kuhn in the right, Maeda in the left, hopefully getting the job done, and then can get them off and put the other guys on. But the other guys, they're not really contenders. They're not really pushing for places. So that's a tuppence worth for myself. Over to Eric for thoughts on Dundee United on Wednesday.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much the same as yourself, Joe. I can't see him changing much in the game. As long as we don't see Hatate back in the midfield and Scales back in the defence, I'm going to be happy. I mean, if he's going to be consistent about something, he needs to be consistent about that anyway until those guys have got their act together in training or whatever the case may be there. But no, I mean, look, it's clear Dundee United will set up to frustrate again, no doubt. I think we'll probably see very much a carbon copy of what we saw yesterday. We know what they're like. We know how they set up because of what we saw before Christmas. So, like, I suppose at the end of the day, I would have to say that we'll only get it. I don't think it'll be a high-scoring game. I think it'll be 2-0 maybe. I don't see us really rattling in goals against Dundee United based on what I saw before Christmas. They will set up uber defensive. that's really my only take on it. I can't really change anything that Joe said in terms of squad. I would be starting pretty much with the same lineup that we had yesterday, and I wouldn't see it as a high-scoring game. I can't see us going out there and beating them 3-4 or 5-0. It'll be 2-0 at a push, maybe 3-0, I reckon. But I don't think we'll find ourselves under too much bother in this game either. But it'll be park the bus, waste as much time as possible, and as I said, carbon copy of yesterday, really. But that's pretty much all I have to say on that. I said my call is 2-0. What about you, Joe?
Yeah, you'd imagine it would be 2-0. It could be high scoring, but it's unlikely. I would say if you're to lump on any particular bet, it would be 2-0.
What about you, James?
I think we'll win comfortably and convincingly, because they will set up the same way that they did in Dundee, but Rodgers will tweak the system slightly so that we don't. I'll tell you what, I'll absolutely kill myself laughing if I'm waiting for the sports bus tomorrow night and I read that Alex Valley's playing instead of Greg Taylor. You guys will be the first people I text if that happens.
Absolutely.
It's the kind of thing Rodgers would do just to troll us, I think, just to spark a debate. We'll see. Anyway, guys, who is our twat of the week? Eric, who do you think?
I'm actually struggling this week.
I'll follow that up. It's not a week for twat of the week. Twat of the week's when we're in the so if we win our 2 previous matches, we can look elsewhere. You get the usual suspects, Clement and Chris Boyd. So,
but even Chris Boyd was on song yesterday.
Who?
He was Chris. Well, he was on song yesterday. I mean, he was in the aftermatch commentary. I mean, Neil Lennon was very balanced in his opinion and kind of views on the game. But everything that he said in terms of, the players didn't show for Clement, all this kind of stuff, Chris Boyd echoed it. Chris Boyd actually said that, there's no point in blaming John Beaton for the penalty. There's no time anymore for excuses. There's no time to be blaming. They just can't, or they have got to stop blaming the officials, everything else, the crowd, the other manager, everything but, Clement taking responsibility himself. And Boyd actually, for once, spoke sense. So I can't call him a twat.
On that note, I think we should park twat of the week for this week. We can have a rollover next week. I'm sure there'll be a good few contenders. I'm looking forward to Patrick Stewart speaking out. It was a nice little line.
So am I, yes. That's going to be very interesting.
Yeah. He wasn't saying anything himself about his January war chest, but Patrick Stewart will be speaking to you guys.
To you.
Yeah, he'll explain the plan. So we can maybe hold off on twat of the week for the reaction to that. But I think we've ran our race for this week, covered what had to be covered.
We were going to go a bit over time this week.
All I will say on twat of the week, right, is that I'll be writing about a certain journalist whose name I'm not even going to mention, and I'm not going to use it in the piece either, because he does not deserve the publicity or any kind of credibility, who earned his nomination today with his comments on TalkSport. So I'll be writing about that tomorrow.
Oh, well, we all know what kind of comments we get on TalkSport, so I'll be interested to see that one. Yeah. So as usual,
guys, thank you very much for joining me tonight. And thank you very much to our audience. If you like what we do, please share us, and don't forget that you can get us on a number of platforms, Spotify and Apple. Am I right?
Apple Pods, yeah, and YouTube.
Apple Pods and on YouTube. Guys, from the three of us, I'd like to say thank you, and we will see you next time.
See you next time, guys. Have a good one. Talk to you next week. Bye-bye.